Greetings and welcome to the Transform Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio. It is Wednesday, July 13th, 2022. This is episode 74 of the podcast, and welcome back, guys. Hope everybody had a great week last week. As usual, we got a couple episodes published for you last week, episode 72, 73. Very quick recap on those. 72, if you want to learn more about using landing pages, sort of the strategy of deploying specific landing pages tailored to particular promotions, I would recommend you check that episode out. And then episode 73, which published on Friday, case study in branding. It actually was kind of a personal story that I was telling about a customer journey that I went on for a fairly sizable purchase and how that sort of unfolded over basically like a 2-year period. So I kind of used that and picked that apart to talk about branding and how this particular vendor was able to convince me to make this purchase based on, a 24-month cycle, okay, that eventually kind of relied on brand and then in our customer interaction, them delivering on that brand and doing what they said they could do, kind of a thing, or showing me that they were capable of doing that. So anyway, would recommend that you guys check those out if you get a chance, if any of that potentially pertains to you. Today, I actually want to engage in or indulge in a bit of a guilty pleasure. I know that my counterpart in Asia, Mike, is probably alternatingly cringing and smiling as I prepare to do this episode, but I'm kind of amazed it took me 74 episodes to do this. But what I wanted to do for you guys today, and kind of have a little bit of fun with, is there's an article that, my idol, my mentor, even though he doesn't know it, Gary Vaynerchuk posted on his website, GaryVaynerchuk.com, where this is an article that came out in 2017, I believe. Unfortunately, they don't date their blog articles precisely. They only list how many years ago it came out. And so this blog article came out 5 years ago. So I'm going to say sometime, because of some of the tweets that he included in here, somewhere around March 2017, I believe, that this came out. But anyway, the point is, it's an article that's titled "The Importance of Speed in Business," quote unquote, the importance of speed in business. And so in this article, what I want to do with this article, guys, is kind of cast this towards you as, if you're I wouldn't say this is required reading for everybody. I mean, first of all, Gary Vaynerchuk is not everybody's taste. Some people that I've talked to about him actually really dislike him and his messaging, so I don't want to pretend that everybody loves him the way I do. And so I wouldn't say, if you're listening to this podcast or you follow us at Transform, you got to read this article. I don't want to pose it that way. What I would say is the eye-opening thing for me in reading this article, which I first came across, I think it was a couple of years ago. I feel like it was somewhere during the pandemic. I stumbled across it. Is that it opened my eyes a bit on productivity, moving faster, moving more crisply through the workday to get more done. And I found that some of the messaging in here, some of the philosophy, some of the tactics, actually helped me do that, actually helped me improve my productivity by simply sort of rewiring me a bit. I mean, I've read this article probably 100 times, guys. I actually keep it open on my iPhone Safari app. I have a few pages open all the time, and this is the upper left page. It's always open in the upper left. I can just click it and read the article again. I have a printed copy at my desk. I've read through that one 50 times or so, at my usual desk location. So it's something that I've come back to many, many times, and it's sort of rewired me to think very, very aggressively and very, very broadly as to what can be accomplished in a single day. I mean, if a run-of-the-mill productivity guru saw my daily task list, they would just faint and pass out. I mean, they wouldn't even be able to comprehend the number of things that I at least attempt to do every day, and sort of think of in like 5 to 15-minute bursts. Particularly when I'm working through non-critical thinking type tasks. Now, when it's time to create or do critical thinking, that's a different story. That's where you clear out, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours at a time to do things like that. But just, the everyday kind of chopping the wood kind of a situation. This article in particular, I don't want to say it's the only thing, but in particular, it got me thinking differently about moving quickly through a lot of work, and also sort of within that, or as a subset to that, is finding the time to create content, finding the time to create sort of the legacy, the documentation, if you will, of the things that I'm working on or trying to record, if you will. So what I wanted to do here, guys, is just really pick out some excerpts. Just kind of point out some things along the way here in the article that sort of tease out the highlights, and then if you guys are interested from there, you can always look this article up. You can just Google the importance of speed in business, or we may post it somewhere too on one of our pages. So basically, let's kind of dive into it a little bit here, guys. At the top of the article, there's a big sort of sub-headline. Speed is 4 billion times more important than perfection, quote unquote. So this is one of Gary's big things, is moving fast brings outsized proportional benefit than being perfect. More so than I think the usual. I think everybody's heard that quote probably, like, good today is better than great tomorrow, something like that. 80% today is better than 100% tomorrow. Different variants on that, kind of suggesting that you don't obsess to the point where you're trying to tweak every detail and then you just get hung up on something forever. You got to move to keep things going. So here's Gary taking that to a much further extreme, saying it's 4 billion times more important. So obviously there's some hyperbole there, but I think this kind of captures his running mantra that, in terms of the way he governs his business and his life, that you have to just do it. You have to just get it done, and you have to just push through it and get on to the next thing. And when you see people get hung up, for example, on creating content, and they want the lighting to be perfect and their tie to be perfectly straight, and the plant over their left shoulder has to be exactly situated right. This is what kills the actual creation of content. So that's the kind of thing that I think that he's kind of referring to here specifically, not just from a work perspective broadly, but from a content creation standpoint as well. Okay, so that's kind of how it starts off. Now, what's interesting is here's a paragraph where he talks about his interaction with his chief of staff that I kind of found funny. He says, I just got finished debating with my chief of staff, Tyler, why I have 3 hours of downtime in Boise, Idaho. We're currently deciding, am I squeezing that into 15 phone calls, or do I fly back to New York? On a daily basis, I am scrutinizing my 12 to 15-hour days down to the second and trying to fill in as much stuff with the smartest stuff in that bucket. So that's the concept of micro speed. I just genuinely believe that 95 to 98% of the people reading this have it reversed. They're not squeezing every second out of every day. They're taking an hour and a half lunch today. They check Facebook and email and Instagram for 2 hours, unquote. So, look, like I said, it's not for everybody, and I think there's different philosophies on what constitutes a productive day. But what's interesting about what Gary's saying here is how he, in a very tactical sense, sort of reduces the day literally down to seconds and starts looking for how every second can actually be utilized. And I think, coming from Gary, this is not an exaggeration. I actually believe that he thinks that way. I mean, most people, I think, will say something like, oh, yeah, I think in 5-minute increments, but they really don't mean that. They just mean they're moving fast. But I think in Gary's case, I think he literally means he's thinking in terms of seconds. And if you can get a 15-second clip in for Twitter, and a 15-second clip in on Snapchat, and a 15-second clip into TikTok, and a 15-second clip into Instagram Reels, he just created 4 pieces of content in 1 minute. You understand what I'm saying? So, again, not to say he's ever posed it that way, but that's kind of what he means when he says using every single second. It's literally down to that kind of tactical orientation. Okay, so let's see. Okay, another quote. To me, it's all about speed. I actually don't care about anything else. Speed, both in people skills and hard work, will trump anything. When you're not spending any time worrying, you're spending time on executing. That's what a great culture is. It's speed. You're not spending the 15 minutes a day bickering. You're not spending the 4 hours a day wondering if that colleague is trying to ruin you, unquote. So I kind of thought that was kind of fast. So here's a great quote. This is actually one of Gary's, I think, sort of enduring quotes that I'll finish up in this next clip with. So he starts off by saying, on your day-to-day, you have to be fast. You have to be quick with your clients. They email you, you email them back. Your day-to-day has to be predicated on the thesis of speed, But your vision, what you want to achieve in life, you're not going to build it in 1 year, yet so many people don't understand that. In the day-to-day, they're slow, and in the macro, they want their business to be huge tomorrow. They are worrying about their years while wasting their days, unquote. And I think that's a very, very powerful quote, guys. I think when you look at Gary Vee, and I follow him very, very closely, guys. If you're familiar with him, you know he has a YouTube show called Daily V. It's literally a guy following him around all day, filming him while he works and goes to meetings and travels and so forth. And some things they don't show and some things they can't show. But that's generally the gist of the show. And so if you watch the show religiously like I have, what you see is a guy who literally doesn't seem to stop for anything. He's looking at his day as if his life depended on it. He's getting as much crammed into that day as possible. He's moving as quickly as he can throughout that day. And he's obsessed about making that particular day as good as possible. And at the same time, when he thinks about what he's trying to accomplish over the years, he's much more patient and much more collected about that. I mean, he's pretty frenetic on a day-to-day basis if you watch some of these videos. But when you hear him talk about long-term plans that evolve over years, he's much more reserved, much more, thought out, kind of a mental standpoint on that kind of thinking. So it's perfectly encompassed, I think, by this quote. They are worrying about their years while wasting their days. Okay, so wanted to move through this a little bit. And Gary talks about how he works, 12 to 18 hours a day. I don't think that's for everybody. I don't think it's the right answer for everybody, and I don't think he thinks it's the right answer for everybody. I think he emphasizes it though, because he wants the people who follow him and look up to him to realize that he did not gain the popularity, the fame, the speaking engagements, the wealth from working anything less than that, at least for his situation. So I think that's why you hear him sort of harp on that a lot. Funny quote here. He says, if your vision is to take a month off and go home at 5 and spend time at the bar, and that is what makes you happy, then do it. But my thesis around speed is just so true. You can't debate whether my 30 meetings, 27 phone calls, 55 tweets, and 79 emails are more than your 2, unquote. So it's an empirical kind of thing that the more you can pump out, the more you're most likely accomplishing. I'm not saying you can reach a point where you're actually inefficient because you're doing so much, and therefore you're sort of harming your own efforts. But I think what he's trying to say here, guys, is simply that when you look at trying to produce output, when you look at trying to produce results, oftentimes there's a period of failure you have to go through, right? There's a period of navigational uncertainty until you get to that success point. So sometimes it just is a matter of hammering away at something many times over to get the result and to get things to break through. And so I think his point here isn't quite as literal as it sounds. I mean, it's kind of funny, literally. But I think what he's really saying is you have to stay on something hyper-aggressively to work your way through that failure cycle and get through to the end point of success. And if you don't do enough to try to get through that cycle, then you never get through that cycle, and you just think, okay, it wasn't possible, or I wasn't going to ever succeed at that. And so therefore you just bow out. So I think there's a point to be made there about volume. He says here, quote, why do I drive and not take the subway? Because of time. It's harder to do things in the subway when I need that 15 minutes. Even if it takes me 30 minutes to travel above ground and it costs me more money, I still get 30 minutes of work in versus 15 minutes of work if I took the subway, unquote. So that's kind of giving you a sense of how he's thinking about that sort of trade-off. Let's see. Yeah, just looking for some of the other relevant quotes I want to share with you guys. I love this entire article, but I don't want to read the entire article to you guys. Definitely encourage you to look it up and take a look at it. He says that when you align on an ideology which allows you to go fast, but think big, you stop worrying about the micro and you put in the work. Speed is a much bigger aspect of business than people realize. Instead of jockeying and politicking and pondering and posturing and debating, for 3 or 4 months. I'm just in do mode now. And when you're in do mode, you expletive get expletive done, unquote. So didn't want to read that word for word, but yes, there are a couple expletives in that quote. Okay, let's see. Okay, I think that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to read to you guys. I'll finish with the closing paragraph he has here. Quote, so when you have the macro patience and an enormous dream, you're doing it for the long term and you're doing it fast and hard every day and leaving money on the table so it all works out. That's why people that dream big, who like to believe they have manifested it in their mind, quote unquote, didn't actually do so. What happened is you gave yourself the right strategy, which then allowed your behavior to map to your ambition. You didn't dream it, you decided to think long term and you invested in it, unquote. So I think, guys, I want to kind of wrap up here, and thank you for indulging me and listening to that entire recitation of Gary's article, my favorite article of his. I think the real takeaway here, guys, is if you're running your business, if you're in your career, your profession, your passion, whatever the case may be, and you feel like there could be a better way, that you could produce more, that you could achieve more, that you could scale bigger, whatever the case is, you fill in those blanks. I think this is an interesting article to read because of the way it turns certain assumptions and certain sort of accepted convention on its head. And it just sort of takes a bit of a different tack on what you should look at every day as when you go to schedule your work, when you go to attack your objective, whatever the case may be. It just presents a totally different a view of that, and I think it's eye-opening. And so I think then you decide on your own whether there's anything actionable here for you or not. But this really got me to think very differently about how each day, even though days can sometimes run together, and they feel like, similar things are being repeated and similar things are being done over and over again, and you start to wonder a little bit, like the basic elements of your brain start to wonder, like, what is the deal here? Like, why am I doing all this? And I think when you read this article, you get a sense of how Gary sort of processes that, navigates that with his approach that I kind of detailed to you here today. So anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up here, shut things down for this Wednesday night. Hope everybody's having a good week, midpoint of the week. We will be back with episode 75, another big milestone there, so excited about that. We'll get episode 75 out by the weekend. More likely, most likely, I should say, it'll probably be a Friday publication on that. But anyway, in the meantime, thank you guys for checking in on our podcast, listening to this podcast. Check us out on Facebook and LinkedIn. Just type in Transform and you'll find us there. You can go to the website, transform.com. And please, if you aren't already, subscribe to our podcast, share the podcast, tell everybody you know about the podcast. We'd love to have the opportunity to grow our audience that way. So once again, thank you guys. Hope everybody's having a great week. We'll be back with you later this week. Good night, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.